Thank you so much for having me. It's exciting to be able to address you today. My name is Ateli Iyala, and I'm the Managing Director of CDP North America. At CDP, our goal is to accelerate us towards a net zero, water secure, and deforestation-free world by mobilizing companies, governments, and the wider capital markets to take rapid environmental action. We run an annual disclosure process for companies, investors, and subnational governments, cities, states, and regions to disclose how they manage environmental issues. And then we share that data back to the marketplace to help influence decision-making and capital flows and general improvement from corporations. And also we work to help educate and build capacity of all of these critical stakeholders on these topics. With over 10,000 companies and governments, subnational governments as of last year, disclosing their environmental impact to us, CDP has been called the world's environmental report card, as it is and will continue to be indispensable to the global tracking, benchmarking, and acceleration of progress towards the goals of the Paris Agreement. But despite some encouraging progress over the last 6 years, the world is still not on track to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. And we're seeing the destructive impacts of climate change with our own eyes today. From devastating wildfires in Turkey and Western United States that seem to come every single year, to deadly floods in China, and another historic hurricane season on the East Coast, both in terms of damage to people and property. We are really feeling the climate crisis firsthand every day, and marginalized communities are also bearing the brunt of the immediate acute impacts of climate change. The latest report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change stresses that the time for action is now. In fact, it was yesterday. To stop the climate crisis and to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, decisive action is needed from all governments and businesses. And really, climate change is a problem that requires all hands on deck. Businesses have a crucial role to play in accelerating the transition to a green economy that works for people and planet. And that means all actors, big and small, in the global economy must step up, including architects, interior designers, product manufacturers, and others. When we talk about the climate crisis, many people normally think of the heaviest emitters, the oil and gas companies, shipping, airlines, and other heavy industries that are known to be responsible for significant levels of greenhouse gas emissions. But it's also important to highlight the vast carbon footprint of the built environment sector. Buildings and construction account for 39% of energy-related carbon dioxide emissions, according to the World Green Building Council. And science tells us that by 2030, we must cut global emissions in half to avoid the worst outcomes of climate change. And so that means to get on track for net zero carbon building stock by 2050, direct building CO2 emissions need to be reduced by 50% over the next 8 years. That's a significant challenge. And not only that, these emissions impacts are not just global in nature. With climate change, it can seem sort of ephemeral and ethereal, the problem that we're talking about, but they have immediate local consequences, whether it's air quality, as well as in drastically impacting social equity within the United States and elsewhere. Specifically in the United States, African Americans are 75% more likely than others to live near facilities that produce hazardous waste. And so business has a moral imperative to do better. It's not just construction as well that is responsible for high emissions in the built environment sector. Life cycle assessments show that repeated renovations of spaces can mean that over the course of a building's life, interior renovations could have the biggest embodied carbon footprint, even more than the structure itself. And so interior designers have as much a role to play in greening the built environment as do constructions and materials companies, that are driving those low carbon materials and construction practices. Luckily, there is a clear roadmap to make change, and whether your sustainability journey is just beginning or has been underway for years. First of all, it starts with making mindful sourcing decisions, paying careful attention to creating a circular economy, in particular, designing for reuse and recycling. As we mentioned at the start, we have this new climate toolkit that's being launched, and that's exactly the type of thing that we need to be able to drive this. Don't underestimate the impact that you can have. You are part of a value chain that includes, yes, heavy, energy generation and materials. And as customers of these high emitting sectors, you do have power influence. And so looking into your selected materials carefully to minimize embodied carbon is really important. Being able to conduct a life cycle assessment of your products to understand the true impact on the environment. Secondly, even if you do not work for a corporation with a significant environmental impact or carbon footprint, your work impacts the wider value chain of the built environment sector. The more that all aspects of this value chain come together, architects, material designers, engaging with construction, product end of life, the more that we can enable large scale emissions reductions. And even your actions, even whether you have a high emissions profile or a low emissions profile, even your actions of setting your own ambitious reduction targets internally within your four walls, within your products, within your supply chain, can have a ripple effect across the market, cascading ambition up and down the value chain. Finally, I encourage you to embrace ingenuity. We are seeing leading companies in your sector innovate for the good of the environment, as well as for the future of their brands, from producing carbon negative carpet tiles to powering office buildings with renewable energy. There are cost savings and revenue growth opportunities on the table for companies big and small if they act on the low carbon transition. And to seize on these opportunities, you'll need to make the necessary investments into R&D that will lead to new products and services. And really at the moment, we are seeing a massive gap in investment in low carbon R&D. We know how we can address the low hanging fruit right away, which is things like switching away from fossil fuels, looking at the energy efficiency of existing buildings, switching to certain existing lower carbon materials. But more advanced action will be necessary after we run out of that low-hanging fruit and after we pass the 2030 milestone. And so it's important for us to invest in R&D now, creating new solutions so that we can reap the benefits in 7, 10, 20, 50 years from now. And CDP and other experts in this space are here to help. There is more data and expertise that exists out there than you can even imagine. And you'll hear some of that expertise in just a minute. And so your own knowledge and perspective can only help bolster the engagement, and set the stage for bold action. As I've mentioned, we know that a big part of the solution will be entire value chains coming together to tackle these unprecedented challenges at the scale and speed of business. And so we are here to partner with you on your sustainability journey, wherever and however we can. In the upcoming panel, you're going to hear the speakers dive deeper into some of the topics that I've just touched on a very high level on. But before I go, I'll leave you with this. Climate change is a massive and present danger. Yes, that's true, but it also presents an opportunity to innovate and fundamentally change how we live and work for the better. Architecture and design have the power to open up our minds to what our future could look like. You have a chance to inspire others through your work, not just within the built environment sector, but across the wider economy. And if done right, you can create spaces that motivate others to meet global sustainability goals. Consider how you can educate your clients and your tenants, your value chain, so they can use and reuse the spaces you create appropriately with limited environmental impact. Each of you in the audience is creative by nature, and so let the challenge of sustainability inspire us to build better spaces more responsibly, designing for the future we must shape for ourselves. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today. I look forward to hearing from the panelists. And again, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Atali. That was really wonderful. And thank you for setting out the problem for us so clearly. You're absolutely right. The future is in creative solutions, not in looking away from the problem. And I really appreciate you laying that out for us. We have a fantastic group of people today to help us talk about interior solutions for the climate crisis. We have with us John Pendorf, who is Senior Associate and Sustainability Leader at Perkins & Will. John, such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting us.
We have Jennifer Chen, who is the Principal at Element Architects. Jen, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
We have Gabe Wing, who's Director of Sustainability at Herman Miller. Gabe, such a pleasure.
Very happy to be here.
And Megan Howell, who's Creative Lead North America at Formica. Megan, thank you for joining us.
Of course, happy to be here.
John, I want to start with you. The idea of the carbon footprint of interiors is, a relatively new area of attention for the design industry. For a long time, we've looked at the heavy hitters of, the building materials, foundations and facades and things like that as big targets for carbon. But your firm, the DC studio of Perkins & Will, recently made a commitment to net zero interiors by 2030. How did you get ready to make a commitment like that? And what seemed to be your next steps having made that commitment?
Those are excellent questions, Avi, because I don't think there's any real way to feel ready fully to make that commitment, because there was no roadmap. There still really is no full roadmap to net zero interiors, especially when we think about truly net zero, not including carbon offsets, purchasing carbon offsets. So we know that it's ambitious, and we felt like we needed to set a goal, and we were seeing other goals being set for embodied carbon farther out into the future. And it seemed like it wasn't urgent enough. Like we needed to call attention to this as something, a conversation we needed to start. And I will say that our London office really kicked this off in the UK market, and the Washington, DC office sort of followed suit a few months later. So we set an ambitious goal, and we also decided we were going to start somewhat slow. And the first step really was educating ourselves and raising awareness throughout the industry. So our interior studio as a group set off on an education series about embodied carbon. We're in the process of getting folks up to speed on the software to use, things like Tally. We've gotten more engaged, not just in DC, but as a firm with the Carbon Leadership Forum. And we're hoping to raise more awareness among our clients, as well as our industry partners, manufacturers and general contractors. So we've held a series, and we are in the process of holding a series of what we call reverse lunch and learns, where we actually bring some information to the table and invite folks to join the conversation and understand what we mean by embodied carbon and what we're looking for. And I think it's really important when we talk about our clients to understand where they're coming from. Embodied carbon can play a huge role in their corporate responsibility initiatives. And talking to them in early design phases about potential material reuse, and salvaging, as well as what are the end of life opportunities, end of useful life opportunities for building materials and systems. So we start small, we start slow, we're educating ourselves this year, and we're asking every one of our projects to pick one material to document, to use EPDs, to understand how to reduce the embodied carbon footprint of the project just by that one material, in the hopes that we can sort of develop a bit of a database that we can share among our designers. And it sparked more conversation, which I think is really the important part, both in the industry as well as internally among all of our offices. We do have an embodied carbon working group that has representatives from all the offices around the firm. That's very active, looking at it now, not just, as you said, at the building scale with the heavy hitters, but also at the interior scale.
Thanks so much, John. I mean, that sounds like a great journey to be on. For folks listening in, watching us, you've heard both John and Natalie and I bring up this term embodied carbon. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the term. If you are not, don't worry. Embodied carbon essentially refers to all the emissions that have to take place for stuff like materials and products and things like that to be, extracted from the ground, manufactured, shipped to your site, assembled into buildings, and then also includes what happens to those materials and products at the end of their life. That is, when the building has to be demolished or when the project is no longer in use. So embodied carbon refers to sort of everything that it takes to make and manage and dispose of the stuff that's in our buildings. And that includes, of course, all the furniture and lighting and carpet and wall materials and drywall and acoustic paneling that goes into our interiors. And so, so far in our sustainability journey, our industry as a whole has been very focused on, lowering how much buildings energy use in order, how much energy buildings use in order to run. And that's what we call operational carbon, literally the energy required to operate buildings. But now we're turning to this embodied carbon, which is all the energy that already has to be expended, all the emissions that already have to be put in the air for all the materials for a building to even come together. And within that, as we've been saying, interiors represent a pretty big percentage. You also heard John speak about offsets. Every human activity generates some amount of carbon emissions. Some of the activities that don't generate huge amounts of, generate extra carbon emissions are really part of a natural cycle of, human beings taking in oxygen from the air, turning to carbon dioxide, and then plants taking that carbon dioxide, turning back into oxygen. But anything outside of that really produces emissions. So it's very hard currently at the moment to bring processes down to zero emissions, which is what we call net zero. And one way to get to that point is to acknowledge that we are making certain emissions, but then to balance it out by pulling carbon out of the atmosphere, pulling that extra carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And so there's technologies to do that. So there's many different ways of dealing with carbon emissions, but the first task is for us to reduce our emissions, which is what we're talking about today with interior design. So, we have to understand what emissions we are putting out there. We don't really fully understand that yet, and then to understand how to reduce that. Jen, I'd love to bring you in here. Tell us a little bit, given this context, why it's challenging for interior designers to address the climate impact of their work. Jen, you were part of a really landmark study at Element Architects that built on work that was being done by the Carbon Leadership Forum, which we heard John mention just a little while ago, where you looked at the carbon footprint of the renovations of your own office and found that, for the life of your office so far, interior renovations add up to almost equal to the carbon emissions for interior renovations add up to almost equal to that of the structure and the envelope of the building. So, how is it challenging now to act upon that insight? And what are some of the gaps that we still need to bridge?
Yeah, and I'll say we recently tightened up our numbers and it does exceed in our simulation. And I think that's part of the difficulty in knowing what the impact is within the interior design and where we need to bridge the gap. I think the biggest gap is that it's not really part of the conversation right now. The Carbon Leadership Forum was the first of a study that I know of that focuses on interiors, but it does look at interiors as a point in time. And then as we're looking at the cyclical renovations for our own office, that's when we realized that the impact isn't a once and done, it continues to occur throughout the building's lifetime. So it's not part of the conversation because it's there's a lack of kind of data in understanding what the impact is. And I think there's a lack of data because it's not really part of the whole building LCA process. And also when it is not fully captured. Interior design is there's a complex palette compared to structure and envelope. It has many spec sections that it takes, that it has materials in, and to be able to capture all of that takes a bit of work. So for example, for our case study, we had to identify every material that we know of and find EPD information that it has to be able to get a number. And even then there's a lot of omissions because there's just not EPD or environmental impact information out there. So being able to sort of identify at least what you can right now, I think the manufacturers are doing a great job in putting out EPD. So as we continue to ask for that information, we then should take the next step to start actually comparing what that means and what we can do in terms of lowering embodied carbon in our projects. So asking for EPDs for certifications is one thing. Now we need to start comparing them to know how we can lower our impact. And Tally is a great tool that John mentioned. EC3 is also another platform out there that helps equalize EPDs, because another issue is EPDs are really hard to understand. And when you're trying to compare two materials, it just doesn't quite match up. And so I think in terms of thinking about bridging the gap, another portion of it is to think about the cyclical nature of our design. So right now, whatever we're working on, we might say, okay, it's a small portion. By the time we get to 2030, it's another duplication of that effort. So if we can eliminate or at least lower as much as we can now, it'll help us get there faster, because by 2030, 2050, we're creating another cycle of impact. So we should really start looking at it now in terms of the urgency that John's talking about.
Right. So Jen, there's multiple things in what you've just said. To quickly summarize, one is, in order for us to understand the carbon footprint of interiors, even to understand what footprint we have now currently on our projects, we need environmental product declarations, which is EPDs for all products. And EPDs are documents that are created by manufacturers. They have a number in them called global warming potential, or GWP. And that is absolutely vital to understanding the carbon footprint of whatever product or material is going into your project. And then each of those individual numbers then has to be added up for you to understand, multiplied actually by volume or number of units of the product, and then added up to understand what is the carbon footprint of your interiors project. So currently we even have gaps in understanding those numbers for certain products or materials. So first thing we need to do is encourage manufacturers to put EPDs out there more and more, and to make them available. And then the second thing is, once we know what our impact is, we have to also understand that the impact is cyclical, as you just said, Jen. So, you're touching a project today, 10 years from now, hopefully that client is going to come back to Element to redesign the space, but they might go to some other firm to redesign the space. And now that all the stuff you've put into the project is now going to become somebody else's problem to deal with, right? And that's how interior design works. Because if you look at the building over its lifetime, it's touched by many hands. And so each person, each instance has to do their best to reduce the impacts. But because it's cyclical, this connects back to what John was saying earlier. We do have to look for opportunities to reuse and recycle materials as much as possible, to avoid throwing away things as much as possible. So how do we get there? And that's an even bigger question. So lots of gaps in terms of information and process and all of that, in kind of developing a better understanding of our impact in interior design. Gabe, I'd like to come to you next. By volume, interior designers specify a lot of furniture. Furniture might be by volume, maybe number 2 or number 3 in terms of the amount of material that interior designers do work with. What are the things that Herman Miller is doing in product development or in recycling program or other initiatives to address the footprint of furniture, which is such a big piece of what we're talking about today?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Avi. I'd say I can remember doing our first life cycle assessment using a consultant in 2004, 2005. And we received an 80-page report that was extremely difficult to unpack. And If you look at where we're at today, we've got life cycle experts on staff. We've got EPDs for our major product lines, and I think we're making progress. And so today, realizing that climate change is an imperative that we all need to address, we're looking at ways that we can reduce the footprint of our products, and we've got a goal internally to try to reduce that product carbon footprint in half by 2030. And in order to get there from where we're at today, you have the data. And so for furniture, you start to look at what are the major life cycle stages and what's the opportunity we have to reduce that embodied carbon inside our product. And for our products, on average, it's about 55% of the embodied carbon comes from material choices we make. And so we know that working with our suppliers and material selection plays a huge role in our opportunity to reduce our products. At the same time, the production of turning those raw materials into parts and pieces that make up our product, either inside Herman Miller or with our suppliers, is another 25% of the carbon footprint. And then end of life makes up the remaining 19-20%. So for the areas that we've got to focus on, and I think Atali talked about innovation being needed to drive this, because the solutions we're on the material side don't exist today. So the sustainability of Miller got moved over to the group, because we know that's where we've got to sit inside the organization in order to drive the change that we want to see. At the same time, we're working with our manufacturing team to understand what are the ideas to reduce carbon inside the places where we produce our products, and working with our suppliers to set similar goals. Those are all things that are underway for us to try to reduce that product carbon footprint. And I'd say this is starting to come together. This requires systems thinking. So I saw some of the questions in the Q&A. How do you balance these factors out? And you can't just focus on without ignoring chemistry and the social implications of where we source our materials. And for us, we've also been focused on increasing the amount of recycled content inside our products to address circularity, which gives you the added benefit of not only or avoiding virgin materials, but we're also reducing the carbon footprint in almost every case of the products that we manufacture. And I think what you're starting to see is where this comes to life for us is we just added 2.5 pounds of ocean-bound recycled plastic to our Air on Share, which it's great that we've got it, and it may seem small, but I think the way that we're approaching it is like all of those small changes add up to big change, and you have to start somewhere. And that 2.5 pounds of ocean-bound plastic reduces the carbon footprint of the product by 5%. So if you think about our goal to reduce it by 50% by 2030, that gets us on the right trajectory. The challenges we face, though, is the ocean-bound plastic we're using today. You can make it any color you want as long as it's black in many cases. And so it goes back to the fact that, hey, we're going to make these changes. We can't just sell black furniture. So working with our supply chains to develop ways to provide lower carbon recycled materials that are colorable is just one of the many challenges we face. And starting to look at the materials that we use, what drives the carbon footprint for our products. So if we look at the top 5 materials that drive our product footprint, carbon footprint, steel's number 1. We happen to buy a lot of steel. And I'm excited to see some of the larger major steel suppliers look for ways to start to use renewable energy to power their mills, which certainly will help us. And for us, nylon 6 is a workhorse material. Nylon 6 it's a relatively carbon material. And generally speaking, with plastics, you pay for performance. So the higher performing the plastic, the more carbon intensive. So our strategy of adding recycled content or switching from nylons to polypropylenes allows us to reduce that carbon footprint. And hopefully without compromising performance, because that's something we can't do, is make it, degrade our plastic, the plastic in our products, and shorten the lifetime, because we want to keep them in circulation. And I think the last piece that I'll share that we're working on is is we've got a program in the US called Repurpose, which is designed to close the loop on our products. And today it's largely centered around reusing our products from our corporate customers and putting them in the hands of nonprofits that can continue to add life to some of those products. When you mentioned the short lifespan of healthcare environments or office environments where you've got office furniture that's been lightly used for 5 to 7 years, there's a lot of life left. And so our Repurpose program is a way to play a match role where we take that furniture and then put it in a local nonprofit where it can continue to be useful. And if we can't reuse it or resell it, we'll work on recycling it today. I think that the area of growth for us in the future is in the area of refurbishment, where how do we make sure that we're refurbing our products that are so highly valued. And many of our iconic products are cherished heirlooms. And so when they're passed down from generation to generation, what can we do to make sure those products continue to delight people going forward? So I think that's a really good snapshot of what we're thinking about and where we're headed. Still a lot of work to be done, but the fact that we're having this conversation to me is exciting as we can start to create more pull in the market for better products. And I think the last thing I do want to mention is this demand for EPDs. I think what I want to share is that it's really challenging today to compare EPDs from one manufacturer to another. It's life cycle assessment. It's like trying to measure the diameter of a human hair with a yardstick. So the air bars, we did a round robin with our fellow furniture companies through BIFMA, and we all analyzed the same product following the product category rules. And the results we saw were plus or minus more than 100%. So just, I'd say keep that in mind. I think it's great to grab an EPD, but I would provide a lot of caution to people who want to shop based on carbon, based on those EPD numbers. I think the more important thing is to ask the product manufacturer, what are you doing today to reduce your product footprint? Not saying, hey, this chair has a carbon footprint of 80 kilograms, and this other footprint has a carbon footprint of 75 kilograms. You're going to buy this one with 75 kilograms. In all actuality, there's probably no difference between those two chairs. That's how good the tool is today. So I'm going to stop there.
Oh my God, Gabe, you just you just summed up the problem in a nutshell right there. I think lots of things here, Gabe, just to kind of give our audience some directionality here. Of course, I think when we look at individual products, there's a lot that we can do in the manufacturing process, which is, as you said, to look at what are the most carbon emissions heavy materials in that product and try and find alternatives or reduce them, trying to figure out cleaner options for them using recycled content, making sure that some parts are recyclable, but then also, I love that you brought up repurpose. The more we can have the products and materials in our industry have a second life rather than go to a landfill, already the better off we will be. Repurpose's mission in terms of diverting furniture away from the landfill into other projects is amazing. You brought up refurbishment. That is definitely I think a new mantra for the interior design industry. Whether we're talking at the interior scale or a product scale, it's about how do we keep the things that are still functional about whatever scale we're designing at, and then only change out the things that need to be changed out, and then give that space, that product, an extended life, a few more years before it needs to be torn down. And so, when we're talking about, renovation or adaptive reuse of buildings, or we're talking about refurbishment of products, that's really important. So thank you so much for bringing that up. As for the problems of EPDs, absolutely. Currently they are the best tool we have at the moment, for us to be able to conduct an assessment of any kind. But there are, obviously, there's still a ways to go in terms of standardizing, those EPDs and making sure that, EPDs, even within the same product category, can be compared against each other. The Carbon Leadership Forum, which we've brought up many times today, and if there's one organization everybody listening to this or watching this program wants to turn to for resources, you should check out Carbon Leadership Forum. That's carbonleadershipforum.org. Megan, I'd like to bring you in here. I know that Formica is committed to carbon neutrality by 2030. Much like John, you have only a few years to go. So can you talk about sort of, what your initiatives are around that, and how are you sort of charting the paths to that? Because, I think everybody understands, it's a long-term journey, but how are you setting the milestones?
Sure. Much like John said, there's no roadmap. So our journey started a couple of years ago. We joined a group with Broadview Industries, who has they're a global leader for sustainability and decorative surfacing. So they really kicked off our main initiative, and we spent the last couple of years learning where we were. We've talked a lot about data collection, so we needed to understand where we were before we could actually set anything in motion. So we have committed to carbon neutrality by 2030, and in the shorter term, we're targeting to reduce our CO2 emissions by 25% by 2026. And carbon represents our top priority. We have other things like water, that we have smaller goals on, but carbon is the most important right now. So that means we're putting extraordinary efforts to cut those CO2 emissions generated by the production of our products. Our projects that we're completing to reduce those emissions kind of fall into 4 categories. So the first one is energy efficiency, which we like to call just basically what it is, doing more with less. So examples of that include heat recovery on our impregnation lines for decorative papers and our core papers, and then closed loop systems on our high pressure laminates to capture, store, and recycle that heat and reuse it. Other projects include higher efficiency lighting throughout the plant, throughout our offices, as well as replacing motors and pumps with new higher efficiency designs. So lots of investments in that equipment to make sure it is being efficient as possible. Our second area is renewable energy. The core element of this pillar is to pursue opportunities to replace our traditional energy sources, electricity and natural gas, with renewable options. So specifically biogas as a replacement for natural gas, and wind, hydro, and solar for more renewable sources for electricity. And over the next 5 years, our focus is on increasing the contribution of those renewables for our overall energy footprint of our plants across North America. Switching to the material side, the third area of focus is yield improvements, or again, doing more with less. Those yield improvements in our operations have always been really important to our manufacturing. We're 113 years old, so that's been kind of a core of our product since its inception, but that's never more important than right now, where those improvements can lead to really significant positive impacts on our environmental footprint overall. And then finally, looking into renewable materials. Such a significant portion of the impact of our panels is attributed to the materials we purchase. Like Gabe said, we're relying a lot on our raw materials that help make our product to make it be better. And it's important to look at those improvements in those raw materials without sacrificing the quality of our product that we're producing, that everyone out there expects it to perform too. So some things we're looking at and exploring, back to that innovation sector, is bio-based raw materials. They have a much lower environmental impact than traditional petroleum-based materials, and bio-based options are becoming a lot more feasible. When we joined Broadview back in 2019, they have a fantastic resource that all of their companies are privy to, and it's called NEMO. It's the New Material House. And it's just a bunch of scientists, people way smarter than me, dumping, all of their time into figuring out better ways to do things for the organization and for the planet. And then during the next 5 years, we are reaching out to all of our suppliers. We're going to demand some accountability. Ateli said cascading ambition. We're going to ask them to, get on board with our initiatives, become passionate about what we need them to be, and set some expectations for those key suppliers. So we can find mutually beneficial opportunities as we go down this roadmap.
Thanks so much for that, Megan. It sounds, I of course, doing more with less should be the mantra for all of us in this day and age. It has multiplying effects, not just in terms of conserving resources, but then giving our natural resources some time and space to regenerate as well. And so the more we are able to do more with less, the better. And of course, the research into bio-based materials and other technologies is really important. At the building scale, we're looking at carbon capture technologies. There's so much going on out in the world of science, but at the same time, it's important for us to address the here and now. 2030 is 9 years away for anyone who hasn't done the math yet. And so, we do need to act. Ateli started with sustainable action. We do need to act with the knowledge we have now. Thank you to all of you for joining today's panel. A thank you to Ateli for today's keynote. Also, thank you to our sponsors for for this Perspective Sustainability series, Armstrong Ceiling and Wall Solutions, Carnegie, Herman Miller, Formica, and Toolkit. I'm super happy to take you through the Climate Toolkit for Interior Design today, which is a tool to help interior designers design low carbon spaces through creative strategies. As you heard today, we all need to fight climate change, and yes, interior designers too, because everything that we do in the building sector puts greenhouse gases in the air. If you didn't already know this, we've seen an alarming rise of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution. And as Ateli mentioned at the start of today's session, we in the building industry account for about 39% of the world's carbon emissions. Note that 28% of that comes from building operations, and about 11% comes from building materials and construction. And this is a figure that comes to us from the Global Alliance for Building and Construction. It's a 2018 global status report, and you will notice that it says core and shell in building materials and construction, because of course interiors do have a role to play in this as well. To understand the role that interiors have to play, you have to understand really two concepts. One is embodied carbon, which we've talked a fair bit about today during today's panel discussion. Embodied carbon represents the carbon emissions of everything that we do to make stuff, to ship it to the site, to install it, maintain it, and dispose of it. Currently, that embodied carbon represents about 28% of our building sector's carbon emissions. So, a little more than 1/4 of our building sector emissions are due to embodied carbon. The rest of it is building operations. If you really want to think about it simply, it's like, you have to put so many emissions in the air in order to, take some stuff out of the earth, turn it into a lighting fixture, and then bring it to your project and install it. And then when somebody turns the switch on for the first time, those emissions, because they have to use energy to run the light, that energy used to run the light is operational carbon. Everything that comes before that is embodied carbon. And then once you've stopped using that light, you've decided to renovate that space, that light needs to, is out of the space. Every piece of energy that you use to dispose of that light fixture will also be part of embodied carbon. So embodied carbon represents a little more than 1/4 of our building sector emissions. But here's the thing. Currently, it's a little more than 1/4, but by most projections, as buildings become more efficient, embodied carbon is going to become a bigger piece of that pie. So, already in many parts of the country, we're moving to greener energy. Our buildings are getting more efficient because of, programs like LEED and things like that. So if business continues as usual, we'll actually start to see that embodied carbon goes from 28% to actually about 49% of the building sector's emissions, because the operational carbon part of it is getting lower. It goes from about 70 something percent to about 51%. The second thing that we've talked about today a few times is that interior design's carbon emissions are related to life cycles, to renovations. That is what drives most of the business in interior design today is, when somebody decides to renovate their space. It's the vast majority of interior design projects. And the thing about that is that it accumulates over time. So you had Jen Chen on the panel today. This is the outcome of the study that Jennifer Chen and her colleagues at LMN Architects created, where they looked at the carbon footprint of their own office. And I'd like you to indulge me for a minute as we talk through this. They used as much data as possible, as whatever's available to them today to look at successive renovations. So, their building was built around 1960, the building that they're in, and they said, okay, at that time, there must have been an interior scheme designed for the space they're in currently. And so, they looked at the volumes of material and so on and came up with a ballpark for what that would have been for structure, envelope, and interiors in terms of embodied carbon. They moved in the early 80s, but they know that they moved into a space that was not the same space that was created in 1960. So it was obviously renovated at some point, and they assumed a projected remodel project. And then they renovated the space in the late 1990s, again in 2000, then in 2010, 2015. So every little brown bar that you see is an interior renovation in space. And this is very much what it looks like for most office spaces, is that every few years, due to some reason or the other, either parts or the entire project are renovated. So, if it's a tenant kind of situation, then obviously every time a tenant moves in and moves out and another tenant moves in, there's a renovation process that happens. But even if somebody is a long-term occupant of a space, over the time that they've used the space, those interior renovations add up. And then, as you can see, they add up to more than the embodied carbon of structure and envelope. So, we talked about eventually by 2050, embodied carbon becoming 50% of the building industry's emissions. And now we're realizing that by the time we get to that 2050, 50% of that 50% will be interiors, right? So, so let's add that up, right? So out of global carbon dioxide emissions, 39% is building sector emissions, about half of that, about 50%. So 19% is building sector embodied emissions. And if we say interior design is going to end up being about half of that, that means 9.5% of the world's carbon emissions are going to be influenced by interior design. These are directional numbers. They're not perfect numbers. There's a lot of calculations still to be done in the space, but this is where we're at. So what can we do about it? Right? Two things to understand. One is that interior design as a relay race, as we've been talking about. So any space that you touch today is going to be touched by somebody else. And any space that you're designing today was likely designed before this by somebody else, unless it's a brand new building. And the second thing is that interior design touches lives. So, obviously we have to look at carbon in context with things we care about, like health and equity. So a good place to start is the climate toolkit for interior design. Okay, the climate, it's available at metropolismac.com/climate toolkit. I'll be sharing my browser and showing you the toolkit in just a second. But before we do that, I'd love to talk to you about how it came together. We created it through a process called the Metropolis Sustainability Hackathon, which involved 12 workshops with all of these amazing organizations that you see listed here. We had 58 participants working together for 4 months to create this toolkit. We created working groups around these topics. So the business case for low carbon interiors was our first group. We had questions today about, how do you talk to clients? We had strategies for specification as a group. We had collaboration with stakeholders as a group. And you can see here some of our process. It was really a very detailed sort of commentary and editing and developing further and further refined resources on each of these topics. And then ultimately, we brought those together to create the Climate Toolkit for Interior Design. And the Climate Toolkit itself is divided into three sections. It tells you how things you can do when you're working with clients. It tells you how to change your own practice. And it also gives you some practical things that you can do on your next project. And of course, throughout, we've provided links to resources and tools wherever those are available. I invite you to check out the Climate Toolkit at metropolismac.com/climate toolkit. Join the movement, help us reduce the footprint of interior design. We can make a difference together, and there is a way to do it. We have to start, as our panelists said now, even at a time when all resources are not clear and the pathway is not entirely clear. We cannot afford to wait. Interior designers, your time is now, so please join us in this effort. And we hope that we can be a part of your journey in addressing your climate footprint, in helping avert the climate crisis, and in safeguarding the future of life on this planet, because that is what is at stake.
Light. I mean, it's not just me, okay? We are all like moths to a flame. If I put a light at the end of a hallway, you will go to the end of the hallway. You know, it's how we choreograph movement. It's how we see the whole world. I was asked to do a solo show in Cologne, Germany, at this gallery that was opening up. We filled the gallery with these images, 2 foot by 2 foot of birds in flight. They were all charcoal drawings and then fed thousands of feet worth of fiber optics along the edges of the wings and the tails and filled the gallery with all of these. And I got a call from the curator about 2 weeks into the show saying that people were behaving strangely. They were coming into the gallery, sitting down on the floor. There wasn't any benches or anything. They were sitting on the floor. They weren't speaking with each other. She'd go out and try to speak to them tell them about the artist. They could have cared less. But they were staying for up to 3 hours, she said. And they were coming back multiple times. And this is not normal. That part of my brain that had been doing design for so long that is really interested in how people engage, or that user experience, really woke up and said, what's going on here? This is interesting. And so I spent about 1.5 years doing research on different types of imagery that engages people, nature-based imagery, natural fractals, that sort of thing, figure-ground ratio. And then we took a look at the light that we were using to feed the fiber optics. It turned out that the wavelength is the same wavelength that they use in a lot of light therapy to deal with depression. The effect that natural light has on us, and henceforth artificial light has on us, is huge, right? So in terms of my work, it's when I first heard that there was this other reaction that was taking place. And then when we started looking at the research in terms of both imagery and in terms of the light, I'm really fascinated in how do we use this? How can we then adapt the work so that it could have an effect on whoever's viewing it? How do we use art, whether it's through imagery or light, in settings to lower stress? In addition to that, the work that's being done right now with what is called distraction therapy, where they're using immersive imagery with the use of VR headsets for patients in acute pain. And just by giving them a headset and something else to look at other than focusing on their pain, the distraction part of that is lowering the amount of pain medication needed by an average of 24%. These numbers are huge and are such a game changer when you look at things like our opioid crisis based on giving people huge amounts of pain meds to begin with. And so, we keep getting closer to be able to say, if you do this with the lighting in the room, you'll have a healthier effect. Scientists aren't used to talking to artists, right? And vice versa, okay? And I think that the only way that we solve really big problems is working across different fields. To me, it's far more exciting to be having these conversations where you start looking at what is our impact going to be, or my ability to help people is greatly expanded by working with other experts. I look at the young people and how passionate they are to make a change. And maybe part of my hopefulness is that I've always tended to see the glass half full rather than half empty. You know, I've been accused of being a Pollyanna like for a long time, but why not? You know, if our view of the world is a story that we're making up as far as how we choose the world, why wouldn't you choose a good story?
Hey everybody, how are you? This is Cindy Allen, Editor-in-Chief of Interior Design, and welcome all to another episode of DesignBiz. I have a really good friend coming in today who is really a rising star in our design world, and so it's going to be so much fun to talk to him, and he'll give you some advice, some tips, and also we'll share some amazing projects. I'm like very, very proud of him. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Cindy. How are you?
Oh my God. Hi, Dan. I'm so happy to see you, sweetheart.
So happy to see you. Happy almost Valentine's Day.
Oh, Valentine's to everybody out there. Big, big love.
Love. And I have to tell you right off the bat, true confession, this is my first Instagram Live ever.
Well, can I just say, I know it's kind of nerve-wracking. The hardest thing is to get on. Like, that's the thing that we always worry about.
It was.
And you know, like 200 episodes ago, there were times where people really couldn't get on and I had to talk. You know, now I can do it, but like in the beginning, it's like
in the biz, right?
What?
We had a tap dance, right? That's what they say in the biz.
Yes, you had a tap dance. You had a tap dance. And now it's almost the opposite, where I'm telling Amy, I said, you know, it might be nice to tell them folks a few things of what's going on in the design world before the person comes on. But when I see you requesting, I want to make sure you guys are okay. So then I hit it and then it's over. You know what I mean?
Well, I just wanted to make sure I hit my cues, you know, find my light, hit my cues tonight, all those things I'm supposed to do with you. So
you did. You look glorious. You look so handsome.
Thanks, Cindy. It's soap. It's soap. That's what it is. So yeah.
So everyone say hi to Dan. He's a fantastic friend of the magazine. And you know what occurred to me, Dan? So it's Dan Mazzarini, BHDM Design. Look them up. It wasn't that long ago, because we could get a lot of young people from all over the world and students and people like asking questions. But I feel like it wasn't that long ago that like you were at our office at sort of a young mixer kind of event, and you came up to say hi. And now it's like a completely different thing where you like really, really like in there, have a successful business, are doing amazing work. It's kind of amazing, right?
Yeah, you know what? It is. It feels that way for me too. I feel like it doesn't feel that long ago, and it feels like 100 years ago, right?
How long was it?
I'm gonna guess that was like 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
So. But you know, it's been an amazing journey. Like you said, just our clients and our business has been great, but also the love. I mean, that's what this is about tonight.
Yeah,
Valentine's Day themed event. We didn't mean to do it, but the love that you have given our company and our team and our work, it means so much, and it really does go the distance. So I'm so happy to be here with you, but happy that night happened and all these have since. So thanks.
Yeah, well, you're very, very welcome. I do feel like it's a very important, like right now, and that's why in the new year I'm like, no, we're going to keep going, you know, that to kind of share the design love and you know, in a way, like friends always say, like it feels like we're in your office and you're like going over work, which I kind of like, that there's an opportunity for me to help connect you to lots of other people and share my friends who I think are so amazing. Do you know what I mean?
I do. Well, thank you. And thanks for the intros. Hi, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, Dan is saying hi. And
Yeah.
so one thing that we're going to see in the work is that like this sort of what a young firm, like how agile and you are just in terms of you're also working with other new kinds of businesses. And that takes, it does take a kind of openness. And I really admire that about you when I'm starting to see this development.
Thanks. You know, our road has been interesting. Like I know you know, but my background is in branding and retail. So 100 years ago, whenever this was.
Yeah, tell everybody. Give everyone that Cliff Notes version.
So it was a real baptism by fire, thinking in retail. It was all the retail standard. This was in the heyday of retail, like 20 years ago. Everybody had money to spend on stores, and Macy's was huge. And so we did this amazing launch. But I went from there and kind of learned, working with different brands, that there was always this brand narrative. And if you could hit those notes, there was kind of a right and a right answer for design. If you could hit the right concept and narrative.
Right.
So, you know, my background's retail. I started this business 8 years ago. And I'll say too, like when I got into the business in like 2001, 2003, it was a dip, right? People were off. And I interned in Chicago for a office design company. And they did beautiful offices. But when that dip hit, they didn't have diversity of work and they took a hit. And we know and love some of the people that work there. And they've all kind of, you know, flourished since. But it sat with me. And I'm like, so as a designer, we all love to be creative and we all love diversity and sort of a richness to the tapestry of our work. Yeah. For me, it's partnered with the necessity to sort of say, all right, when retail takes a hit, we can do something else. And if hospitality isn't so great now because of a global pandemic,
like COVID, hello.
Who would have thought, right? But so I like the diversity for the day-to-day and keeping it fresh, but also it's worked in our favor. So
fantastic. Well, first of all, a couple of really strong messages out there for everyone. First of all, it is something I might have said like thousands and thousands of times as a designer to diversify. So, and Dan is proof pudding of that because the work is really well-rounded. And, you know, you were saying like hospitality. Everyone wants to get into hospitality. There isn't a designer I don't know that doesn't want to get into hospitality. And I always say that they're kind of the golden children and COVID just like wiped it out. But when it comes back, it is going to come back in the biggest wave we have ever seen because everyone's going to want to travel. So anyway, but the fact that you have successfully branched out. And so that's one thing. And the second thing, which is really, really important that, as Dan said, that he learned from his days in retail is like, what's the narrative of your design, right? Yeah.
That and dressing mannequins, but that's a totally different story.
Wait, what did you say?
And dressing mannequins, right? It's always like a practice skill in retail, so.
I see. Yeah, that's great. That's great. So, so tell everybody like maybe the first, second, third project, like how that happened when you got off on your own.
Yeah. So, you know, Brian Humphrey, who I started the company with 8 years ago, he and I have known each other for 20 years. We started working on like little projects here and there. And the first one that hit, I worked with a woman who brought us into a project to do a restaurant downtown. It was called The Lion. And it's not open anymore, but it was where Barbra Streisand got her start. It was sort of like cabaret. And so we reimagined it at that time. Anyway, that restaurant was sort of one of John DeLucci's sort of celebrity chef moments. Great. This guy I met on the beach was like talking to me about what you do. And I said, we're kind of doing this stuff on the side. And he heard about the restaurant. This is the power of sort of like the right project at the right time. He was like, oh, I know that restaurant. That's great. I might have a project in Miami. A week later, I'm on a plane to Miami to look at this teeny tiny deco hotel and landed this little hotel project down there called Lords. Very colorful, very narrative. And from there, it just kind of snowballed, right? Like a couple of people saw the work. We got some residential. Some people who we did the residential for sort of like pulled us into their restaurants or their development. So it, you know, let me sort of be the poster child, I think, in your words, for how it kind of snowballs. And it's nothing if not about relationships,
Right.
but you got to keep the people happy. And for me, keeping people happy has equated to listening, trying to listen and answer what they're asking for just better than they thought it could be done. So.
No, that's great. Yeah, I guess I didn't know you then, right? I didn't know you then.
No, this was before. This
Yeah.
before.
Everything's either
So,
pre-Cindy or post.
yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
No, but that's great. And it's true. By the way, I just want everyone to know, so Dan Mazzarini, BHDM Design, and he was talking about a project in New York. So he's in New York. So tell me like how things are going just with COVID and your staff, everyone's at home. Like, how are you working?
Yeah. A year in, right? I mean, this is like
It's crazy. It's insane.
It has been a real ride. And I, first off, hats off to my entire team. Like, everybody was so nimble and pivoted so quickly, picked up their laptops or carried a desktop computer under their arm on the streets of Manhattan. But within a day, everybody was back online, remote server, doing their thing. So we pivoted very quickly, and it's allowed me to sort of become a believer in remote work. But we had a dip, right? Last March, we were like, nobody knew. Nobody knew what was going to happen. Right. So we were conservative in what we did. We did the furloughs, we did some layoffs, we did reductions, we kind of did all that stuff. And I'll say, gratefully, we were able to bring people back, like almost everybody back back to salaries. And so it's with gratitude to our clients and my team for their dedication to go through this. But we did it. It feels like we're over the hill and like to the finish line. We just got to sort of be hand in hand with this with everybody. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, look, you know, it's like no one was immune to the wave of everything that was going on, right?
Yeah.
You know, there was, you know, shock and fear. Yeah. I mean, I suppose there still is, but then, you know, there's the how to survive, you know, and what you have to do and the hard choices you have to make. And then, you know, companies woke up in some way, right? Companies are are trying to figure out, like, if I'm going to be in the business or I'm not going to be in the business, right? Yeah. And so if you are, it's not about not doing anything, right? So,
and we didn't really change the way. I shouldn't say didn't change the way that we worked. Our product is still the same. We still, we still try to collaborate as much as possible, and all these platforms have been tremendous. But at the same time, like, you miss the camaraderie. Like, we're all in this business to build spaces for people, and we miss the people, right?
I know, it's crazy.
That's the tough part. I mean, I know you do. So
I totally do. And so, like, do you have any insight on some of the hospitality work, which you're starting to get more of? Like, were any of those young developers, and are they, because in hospitality right now, again, we've heard so much about like how crazy busy it will be, but in some ways it's like, how financially stable is a company to kind of right now invest, right?
Yeah. I think it's a great question. I mean, Cindy, I think you can attest, I built a business on budget to start, right? Midwestern minded, like, I like a value, and I think that is projected in our work, but to the benefit of our clients too. So I look at the next 2 to 3 years as, if you're a young company, which I'm going to call us on the younger side. I said we were 7 years young. Now I can say we're 8 years old, but we're kind of still.
You are starting to become a different thing. Right,
the wrinkles are showing, Cindy. You know what I mean?
You look pretty damn good.
You're so sweet. So, but I would say, we look ahead for the next couple of years, and I think if you can talk about the value that you bring to the projects, there's so many beautiful designers out there. This is going to be a value-minded time. People are going to be getting their feet back in the game across the board, and we're all in the same boat, right? Like, we want to be bold but sort of trepidatious in the spend. We want to be really cognizant of bringing enlightened ideas, but with mindfulness to cost. So for me, I think when we talk, we'll talk about value too. And that's about experience, that's about narrative, but that's like about line too. So definitely. That's some of what we're talking about with people.
Yeah, and I think so for anybody out there who has a new or young firm, every client is different, and you want to solve their problems. And as Dan said, quite a few that he's been able to create relationships, needed being that nimble. And as you said, being very cost conscious.
Yeah.
And helping them build their business at the same time, I would suppose.
Well,
right?
Cindy, let me just say too.
Yeah.
If you have a big budget, please call me. Like,
yeah, he wants the, no problem. Okay, let's be clear. Okay, I'm going to pull up now, Dan. See if you can move the camera a little bit so that maybe we lose a little on top, so that because now there are images below. So yeah, right.
How's that?
Yeah, that's good. By the way, you're coming in and out a little bit. Are you?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Okay, so let's talk about, something that you made sexy that maybe people wouldn't have thought about before, which I love. Like, why don't you tell the story of the dental clinics? Are they called clinics? Called Tend.
Yeah, we're designing patient experiences now, Cindy. So
I see. Okay, excuse me. Okay, let me find.
We're gonna judge all this stuff. So
yeah, exactly. So let's talk about a client like that. How you found them, and now you're working on multiple locations.
Yeah. So Tend came to us actually through a relationship we have with a company called One Medical. What's interesting is I had no experience in healthcare before we worked with One Medical, but their approach was really patient-centered and about a hospitality-forward approach to healthcare. Fast forward, some of that team went over to start Tend, and this is really a rethinking of dental. Like, so many people have fear of going to the dentist or bad experiences. This wanted to flip the script and really put the patient in the driver's seat. So everything from a concierge when you walk in, not just somebody at a reception desk, but somebody to sort of guide you through the experience. What flavors do you want? Can I give you a toothbrush before I visit our brushery, which was your first image, that was specifically about brushing and feeling fresh before you even went into your appointment. Mm-hmm. This is really sort of DHDM's sort of hospitality hat on, with a lot of listening and learning that we did around healthcare. So certainly all the standards, all the cleanability, all of those functional pieces are there. But this was about helping to, through the first location and then some of these subsequent ones, give this young brand, the startup, a kit of parts as they grow to 20 locations in the next 2 years. So it's been exciting.
I mean, come on. So for anybody out there, that's kind of amazing, right? That like you got involved right in the beginning. And also, as you said, like, what's the narrative and how do you create a really strong brand identity? I mean, look at this bathroom. This is insane. So tell everybody about this.
So they Tend have a fantastic in-house creative team. I mean, to do a launch, which is really what they were doing, they needed marketing, they needed digital, they needed kind of all these things. So they developed this, what they call the swish pattern, which think somewhere between like, gargling. And like Wallpaper. And I think they worked with, it might have been Flavor Paper. I have to double develop this, but then we took it and turned it into a more commercially, applicable kind of sort of vinylized system. But this with custom concrete cat sinks and these beautiful mirrors, it was really about developing something iconic for them in their user experience that people could Instagram, right? That brush buff, when you Instagram it, it's backwards. So in the mirror, it reads forward, right? So it's reversed behind. Lots of like trial and error, full scale mock-up on that one, Cindy. But
I love that. So I'm kind of interested in like, how did that start? And then someone said, oh shoot, it's backwards, right?
I think it was a woman named Kaylee on our team who's so thoughtful. She actually printed all these things, put them up, and then we like in the office were like, is this right? Flip the camera around. So it was trial and error for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so great. By the way, but I didn't catch, someone said, best company, best boss. So so whoever you are, let us know, because I missed it.
Basket of mini muffins on the way. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. And someone's saying, hola de Colombia, saludos de Colombia. All right, but I mean, this one, it's just so fun. And can I just say that since COVID, I have, I think 3 of my staff members that have been to attend.
Perfect.
which kind of fantastic.
I'm so happy to hear it. And welcome everyone. There's, I think, 5 locations in New York, soon to be 10, and we're going to Boston and DC too. So
wow, amazing. Wow. So tell us, when is that happening?
It's happening now. So yeah, so this, and this was sort of our role. And interesting, Cindy, how like the retail background, like all those retail rollouts where you design a fixture and do 1,200 stores in a year, kind of was able to put that hat on a little. This was not as easy as like kit of parts, but we did get to test fits and quickly helping them sort of look at real estate and assess what's going to work well. So coming to Boston, I think by summer, and DC by summer. And then I know there's new markets coming up too. So everyone keep brushing and flossing.
Keep brushing. Now tell me, is the wallpaper, is that like consistent in the other locations? Are they different colors? Like what's the deal?
No, so we did look at, we have other colors, but we've sort of held them in pocket. In the 5 locations that we did, we tried different things. So Flatiron was the first, which was like first store, ground floor retail real estate.
Was it this one?
This was the first one. So we tried out this concrete tile for the first time. It was great, but they kind of installed it in a very regularized pattern. We're like, no, we want dental floss swirling all over. So, trial and error on some of those things. The Swish wallpaper is always consistent, but some of the finishes, we, by I think the 4th location, which is in Chelsea, and I don't have a picture of it for you, we actually did this, what we called the piazza. So it's like 2 sinks that face each other with like this beautiful sort of dome above. So in trying different things, it created a kit of parts, and now they have sort of like 25 different iconic looks that they could do. So
that's very cute. I mean, all the words around are super fun. What is that? Who's that? What's going on over there?
Which one?
Oh, I don't know. It sounded like something funny out, like to your right. No? Are you in an office?
Okay.
What?
Since we're keeping
a doggy
cash today.
What did you say? Oh, there is a dog.
It's a dog. I'm sorry. Merle is our newest office member. So.
Oh my God! Hi, Merle. How are you? Sweet?
Good, but
hi, Merle. Oh, Merle's so cute. That's so cute. Okay, I knew there was something going on.
There's something. We tried to conceal it, but.
Wait. So you're in your office right now?
Yeah. So I'm in the office. We're here. There's a couple of people who come in a few days a week. But we are. I say the office is open, but we don't require anyone to come in. So we're keeping it casual and trying to, let people feel out. Sometimes you got to see materials together.
Yeah, of
and
course.
we have to wear masks and do it. But but Merle is here consistently, for better or worse. So
I love that. Now, what do you think about? I know everyone has said, like, we've kind of proven that we can do it. We can do the work wherever we are, except we need to come together to collaborate.
Yes.
So I don't think any of us have a real clear vision of what the future will look like. Because the one thing I always say is we've proven we can do work other places, but the truth of the matter is we actually are very stationary in the place we're at. Now, when everything
I always think designers are kind of fancy hoarders. Like, we love stuff, right? We need samples and we need to see. So totally. Guess where we don't want all that stuff is in our houses most of the time. So
I know. I proudly say I'm a design hoarder.
Yeah.
But the stuff. What?
It's good stuff, right?
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
I will say what this time in the past year has taught me is that I don't need people to be in the office 5 days a week, but I need people to be here when we need to be here. And that's really a service to our clients and to each other. So the thing I'm most excited about is to get a little, a team raw back in session, because I just miss everybody. But
yeah, of course. No, of course. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it feels to me like if it's not 5 days a week, it's going to be 3 days a week. But but you kind of need to be together during those 3 days, right? Or something.
Yeah. So that's what we're already talking about too. And then I don't know if we'll do teams or we'll do sort of like, squads or whatever, but I think we're figuring that out too.
Right. It's in a strange way, and you tell me if you feel like this, in a strange way for like the boss. So let's say you're the boss, and with my team, like I had my team, like they're used to me not being there when I'm traveling, and I'm traveling reasonable amount, but not always, and I'm always back to close an issue and stuff like that. But now it's sort of like you would feel guilty if you were like home when you weren't in the office, even if you were working anyway. Do you know what I mean? And now it's sort of released that whole thing that we have in our heads.
Well, I'm convinced you have a whole production studio in your house now, Cindy.
I do kind of.
Totally, right?
I do kind of.
Yeah, I feel like the whole thing has changed. I mean, we are lucky enough to have a place on the North Fork, which we love, but didn't know we'd spend so much time there this past year. So, you know, for me and for the team, you know, we got people in Connecticut, we have people in Long Island, and commutes are significant. So what I think we could do is quality of life, I think, is something that on the other side of, you know, this pandemic that we'll focus on to say, we have made this work in the least desirable situation. Let's make it work to our advantage when everything's most desirable.
Right, exactly. Well, you know, the funny thing, I do kind of tease about, you know, we're always talking about health and wellness, and like hospitality will come back in a big way. It'll all be health and wellness, but in terms of your team, they're going to be busy. They're going to be really busy.
Yeah. So anybody hear that? You're going to be busy. So
you're going to be really busy. So get ready. Get ready. Okay. So I do want to talk about a very special project that won an honor for Best of Year called Real. And this one is, you know, we're talking a lot more about our emotional state these days and how important it is. And I would venture to say that most people have, I don't even care if it's this much, but have a touch of depression with everything that's been going on. So the fact that, you know, it's not a stigma at all anymore. And so talk to me about this very, very beautiful, important project.
Of course. Well, first of all, thanks for the recognition and all of your support of this project and brand. Real came to us as sort of an incubated idea from a very consistent and grounded founder. And her message was really about trying to celebrate mental wellness as a pillar of wellness for people. And this was, you know, September of 19. So a very sort of special time when we were, you know, sort of just delighted to talk about mental wellness. And then we were bringing this project on board, like last 3 weeks of construction, the beginning of March. And so this construction site closed about 2 weeks prior to being completed with the closures from COVID. But Real is really about rethinking the therapy experience, not the quality of therapy, but to try to bring an understanding and sort of celebrating therapy, not just normalizing, but celebrating it. People to be a totally well person. And so we helped the founder, Ariella, think through the user experience. So again, this is sort of greeted by a reception person or a concierge and then brought to a lounge. And this is different than a lot of therapy experiences where it's all about the individual and not about community. And she said, listen, I don't want people to be ashamed. I don't want them to hide behind a door. I want them to see each other and share experiences and be part of a group conversation and kind of all these different things. So we listen up front to what she was trying to do, but really thought about the journey through the space as a circular experience, and really helped to kind of bring spirit and sort of a palette to this that people could see themselves in it. So it's lots of different fleshy skin tones and
this is so beautiful, and it's a tile, right?
This is a tile, This is from I think this is from Stone Source. Pushing
Stone Source.
Away.
Stone Source.
She started her concept about to help female and female identifying people sort of do a journey into therapy and understand that they're not alone. But since she is, I think, all of COVID, to your point, we're all a little depressed, but not a lot, sort of like about things. And so she really has taken this before she even opened to the digital platform. So we're happy to share these images, and we can't wait for her to open officially, but they're kind of doing small groups and trials in the space now. So super rad owner, like just the best all around.
Yeah, so by the way, someone's saying Stone Source. Yeah, we love Stone Source. This owner is really, really young. And so like she's a go-getter. She's making it happen. It's like really, really unfortunate that it all collided during, at COVID, but it'll
yeah, but she has been wildly successful getting her message out there and getting visibility. And the space helps, right? Because
the space is amazing. Wait, okay, so you have to tell everybody about the wallpaper.
Okay.
Guys, can you see the wallpaper? Take a look.
I don't know if you can zoom in or not, but
I can.
Ariella, the founder, one day was wearing this awesome jumpsuit that had this kind of very Zoftig pattern on it, I should say, sort of voluptuous. And I was like, what is this? She's like, this is the best outfit ever. And I was like, what? And here it was like these cartoon kind of like female figures. And I said, well, I just did the sketch myself, like all these sort of
boobs. You guys see them? You see the boobs?
Sketches. And she loved it. And she's like, can we do something? So we turned it into wallpaper. And now the print room, it has all these like fun boob wallpaper on it. So
I love it. And actually it's very chic. It's not, it's like you said, it has a little cartoon. And you also have these beautiful, look at that, you guys. Isn't that gorgeous?
Thanks. Yeah, this is actually in the therapy suites themselves. This sits behind the guest. But, again, back to hospitality. We want these spaces to feel welcoming, to celebrate wellness, to be thoughtful. So there's like a front porch that asks thoughtful questions before you walk in. The suites themselves are, I would say they kind of feel hotel room in their vibe, right?
Yeah.
They've got a little spirit. They're not stark. And that's really just with trying to bring the spirit of the brand to each touch point for the user as well.
Yeah, there's a lot more. We can't show it, but at one point it'll be open or shortly, and there'll be there'll be some more fans there. But anyway, what?
And we'll all go.
Yeah, we'll all go. We'll all go celebrate. We'll actually all really want to go in many ways than one, but celebrating for sure. Yeah. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about hospitality. You sent over one of a Novotel. So tell us about your relationship with them.
Sure. So, and God bless the internet and God bless you for like helping us with awesome press pieces. Accor called us out of the blue, right? They saw work that we had done in Waikiki. Remember that Hawaii project?
Oh yeah, I remember. It won Best of Year.
Yeah. Thank you. Saw that, and Accor called. And, these are, like I said before, relationships. We had a conversation. They just wanted to know us. Great. Kept us in mind. We would sort of pen pal back and forth. And then this project came along. It's kind of a refresh of the lobby and the roof for, we received a project that already existed, but really needed that brand jolt, needed that narrative. And so you're looking at, these are, Jennifer.
Where is this, Dan? Where is this?
This is in Miami.
Oh, it's in Miami.
Doesn't it look nice and warm, Cindy?
Yes, let's go.
Jennifer on our team sent us these. We've been installing, parts.
Yeah. It's not. These aren't like pro pics.
No, more and better coming soon. But the notion for this was the Novotel brands. This is our first project with them. They have pillars like all these brands, and theirs was sort of about this mix of organic and colorful and playful and sort of. Lots of different, textures that would be involved. So we looked at the sort of shoreline for Miami, right? It's that beautiful white sand, and but rather than go teals and cool and kind of what you think like the Delanos of the world, we said let's heat it up. Let's sort of make this warm, sandy, sunsetty, suntan vibe. So everything's kind of bronzy and blush. It's a little Golden Girls meets Steel Magnolias. Like blush.
I love it. I love when you say. I love when you go there. Yeah.
Yeah. So so it sort of gets luminous at night, but lots of fun pieces, lots of flexibility, spaces for people to work and play and live and drink. So
wait, so tell me, like, is it open now? When was it finished? It's just finishing, right?
Yeah, it's just like the rooftop furniture went in today. Jennifer's like, send these to Cindy. I'm like, hot off the presses. So
I love that. And when did and what are they saying just about COVID and how they're handling opening a hotel right now? This is good stuff, you guys.
Yeah. Well, the hotel remained open, right? So it was really the opportunity and amenities they offered to the guests that they kind of put a pause on food and beverage, and it was a little more grab and go. But, Florida, I think, because of their weather and climate, they have more opportunity for outdoor use. So the rooftop was a priority. So that's just wrapping. They're using the space gently, I would say. Like certainly signs and deterrents for social distancing. But just like everywhere, everybody's anxious to get back. Everybody's looking for some way to feel some sort of joy. And so they're very proud of their new project and want to invite people in it, and then sort of say like, no, don't sit there. But
yeah. So tell me, so that's great. Actually, that's great news. I can't wait to see the roof because you did the roof too, right?
Yep, more to come.
Yeah, more to come. Okay, watch out. Let's talk about, because I don't know what this Park Central project.
So this is
on the boards, you guys.
This is on the boards. So, and I sent a bunch of work to you, Cindy, that is on the boards intentionally because this is kind of where we were as a moment in time, right? We had all this work queued up. We kind of took a dip, and now everything is like, not just hit play, it's like play X2. Like just, that was my VCR reference, by the way. I am. But
you're so cute. Tell me about all this
It's so this is our first project with Highgate and friends at Highgate. They're amazing to work with. And this is, I think, the 4th largest hotel in San Francisco. So we're helping to reimagine this. It'll be a new flag. But BHDM has done all the public spaces. So 3 floors of public spaces from check-in and reception, working with sort of the brand pillars to think through something we're calling the Garden Cafe. This is a first floor grab and go marketplace that we're helping them not just with the design but the buy and sort of bring a more NorCal maker market vibe to their marketplace. This is in the arts district of San Francisco, Cindy, and so we tried to bring that narrative in a different way. And so we're looking at sort of artists' mediums, so whether it's textile or ceramics or sculpture or drawing, you'll start to see those kind of dot the different parts of the space. So this plaid floor and sort of textured ceiling with these ropes referenced the sort of textiles and the weaving, but in a non-specific way. So yeah, this bar on the first floor, you can see this kind of sculptural wall to the left, all sort of very Louise Nevelson meets sort of like go be plaster moment. So yeah, we're excited about that.
Somebody loves the ceiling pattern. Yet these look like really enormous spaces, Dan.
It's almost 800 keys. It's a large format.
Yeah. This is nice to see some of the pattern play that you're working on, right?
You know, with a space this big, Cindy, I think we always look for a way to tie the narrative throughout, right? What is it? And so we set a page on like the narrative on the different palette stuff, but we also looked at kind of a subtle architectural grid. I won't call it a plaid, but it sort of appears in things like the ceiling and the floors, you know, in glass and ceramics. This is a second floor pre-function space. So, you know, we tried to weave the narrative throughout all these different spaces, but it is big. There's like 3 different food and beverage outlets, 3 floors of conference rooms, you know, 800 keys. It's a big property.
Yeah. I see that, by the way, the images just all come in all mixed up. So I'm constantly trying to navigate it. It's not your fault. It's just Instagram, I don't think, was ever ready to do all these things. But I did find, I want to show this because this is so cute. I found the illustrations of the rooftop of the Novotel, which is
the Novotel. So
and these are beautiful illustrations too, by the way.
Thanks. We do a mix. I think this is my my age, but also my preference showing. Like, I love a hand drawing, right?
Yeah.
It's just this medium that we as visual people can communicate so easily with each other and with our clients.
Yeah.
And I think it also leaves a little bit to the imagination, right?
Yeah.
So
I know, because you do want, that's the thing, at the end of the day, you don't want it to, you can make something these days almost look exactly like what it's going to be, but like you kind of want an element of surprise, don't you?
Yeah, we have a different client, different conversation, a different day, but we have a different client who likes to hide what they call Easter eggs throughout their projects. So things to find and sort of discover.
Hey.
So, yeah, that's like the real life example of things that you would feel out in a rendering too.
Oh my God. Yeah, that sounds like actually an interesting story. All right, so let's, wait, I want to get to another, tell us about Tangram, and I see you sent some like fun image pre, and then we have like while you're working on it, right?
Like sketch to rendering to construction.
Yeah.
So Tangram is a development in Flushing that we've been working on for 6 years. So our business is old. This came to us long ago as a referral from retail days. So this is back when malls were, understanding that people would still like use them in the traditional way. So in the past 6 years, this has evolved a lot. Lots more food and beverage in this space, but we're developing 250,000 square feet. It's the 2 podium levels, on top of which there's 2 residential towers and a commercial tower and a hotel. So big project in Flushing, you can see from the highway, but
Yeah.
we looked at the site. There's a huge typographic change. We looked at the name that they had come up with, and said, great, let's do this as this sort of 3D expression of what a tangram is, which is all those kind of faceted shapes.
Yeah, you can kind of see it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the whole ceiling is sculpted. This is what's, the framing is all up for this now. The skylight is this big faceted kind of glacier thing. All of the columns are faceted. This is the entrance to the food hall and beer garden that we're designing. So it's really, there's a mixed bag of user experience happening in here. And I think over the 6 years, it really evolved from just being about shops with food to really about food and more lifestyle brands. So there's fitness here now, there's wellness. I mean, all these sort of topics and themes that are coming up tonight, right?
Yeah.
But this is fun. So this is the food hall. There was 2 images. I went on a trip to Asia and I came back and I said, I think the concept for this food hall, stay with me, is Blade Runner Night Market. What does it mean? And I'm like, well, I don't know. We're going to figure it out.
I love that.
Organic industrial during the day, and then activated with all of these like kinetic lights and
Yeah.
stuff at night. So it just becomes this like super, very like pumped up kind of Tron-esque space. So this is coming to life now. We're pretty jazzed.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So can I ask you, that's a big project.
Yeah.
How did they find you? I'm going to pull up some of the project. And
Yeah.
How did they find you?
So again, relationships. We were working on a restaurant with what I'll say was a very challenging client, and the restaurant consultant on the project liked the way that we handled the client, and we were thoughtful and listened and we were responsive, and they said, you're the right person for this job. So that was 2 years in business. They gave our name. I went to one meeting, they signed our contract, which tells me we underbid it at the time, Cindy,
Right.
but you learn, right?
Right.
And the rest was history. Like, I think we started to sketch on this right away, and it's been a good, long 6-year relationship to get to this point, but it's coming out of the ground. This should be wrapping hopefully like end of Q3 this year. So.
Wow. And wait, so what was there originally?
It was 2 square city blocks in Flushing, mixed use. So it was some apartments, some, restaurants, some marketplaces, and this developer kind of bought the 2 blocks, demoed the entire site, excavated, 6 levels underground. It's just this gigantic undertaking that
This is incredible, this image.
Easy. So, and this, I love this part. So this floor, you can kind of see these weird lines in it. It's all terrazzo, but this is like before it gets polished. So I love it before and after.
I love it, but I love it like that. It's so cool. Yeah. All right. So wait, hang on a second. So what's kind of has things like for that project, have things moved forward? Did they stop for a while and then move forward?
I mean, every project got put on hold for a little bit, right? Just with 2 or 3 or 4 months in New York. That one, because a lot of their work was still on this part of it, was still kind of open air at the time, a year ago.
Yeah.
They had a sort of a blip, but then it came back very quickly because of just the circulation and things that they could have on site. But yeah, everything got pushed back. So, but I think now it's funny, we had a call today with their branding team to sort of revisit 6 years later, like, where should this be? And gratefully, we're going to kind of land close to where we were. But, the world has changed. The messaging now, we're talking about changing the brand tagline to something that's more about come back, like make this part of your life again. Because I think to things that we've said all evening, this is about creating spaces for people to celebrate in, to come together in. And I think, and I'm sure you feel, on the other side of this crazy global pandemic, people are going to be ready to get together. So we're excited.
Yeah, and the other thing is, because everything is changing, is like when we get to the other side, everybody is going to need design.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Yes.
Right?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
for the first 7 months, I was like, can I get someone to cut my hair? So, I mean, really, these are very important.
You look good. You look so good that somebody in the beginning said, can you turn the comments off so I can see him? Because that was really cute. That meant they thought you were really cute. So I love that. So let's just talk about some, like, what's happening like now. Are you working on the projects that have already been established? Have there been calls for anything new? Like, what's the tenor like right now?
Yeah, all of the above. I mean, this is work that I can show because it's been in development and it's out of the wrapping up. I would say the past, probably from about November on, we were getting calls about things. And I think the end of the last year was really speculative. People wanting to get their budgets in place for the next year and kind of understand. And we know that, like, it historically with what we see, right? It's like November gets quiet, December's about eating and drinking too much and like seeing everybody. And then January, everybody's like, oh, I'm back to work. This is my fiscal budget is back. So people have been calling. It is not like the faucet's turned on entirely yet, but like
of course. Yeah. So
I think that I feel really positive about it, Cindy. Like people are coming back. Some of the people that we didn't see on the other side, our great vendors and our great clients are back in their jobs. So we think it feels really promising. Yeah.
That's great. By the way, my good friend Daniel Germani, amazing designer, he's on. He goes, Dan has it. It was very, very cute. Thank you, Daniel. Love you, Daniel. You would see him at Best of Year. He'd always be sitting in the front row and typically wins. but yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to understand, like, for you, so you and your partner, own this firm. What was, like, how hard was that to go through?
So for us this year? Yeah. I mean, this is my baby, you know what I mean? Like we love what we do and I love everybody on our team. And so it was really challenging. This will not be a unique story, but a lot of sleepless nights sort of wondering, what should we do? How long do we hold on? Do we keep this office space / clubhouse? Do we let it go and we start over? Because for me, I am a creative person trying to be a business person, but I will always hold in my heart the responsibility I have to people's livelihoods and being a business owner. Yeah. So it was really challenging. And when we had to make some tough decisions, never would take it lightly, but those are tough conversations to have. So it was with a lot of gratitude and exhale that we were able to bring people back on, and gratefully, had a very busy 2020. So,
Is your partner, so for everyone out there, we know Dan, we don't know the other partner.
Brian and I business together.
So is he the business partner?
No. So I actually bought the business about 4 years ago. But Brian is amazingly creative and talented. So a bunch of the renderings are Brian's hand.
Oh, really?
For 20 years. He's just the best. I think this is another fun thing, sort of lesson to share with people. Not every creative wants to be a business person, and that's okay, right? Yeah. Find the people who bring your vision to life. For me, like Brian and I, we parted ways as business people, but we're so admirable as creatives. So, he still works with us. We still celebrate him. So it's been a good 4 years since we kind of did that, but I wish he was the business person, because that would take a lot off my plate someday.
I was going to say, so you don't have, hi Brian, but you don't really have anybody to do that?
We have an amazing bookkeeper. Her name is Debbie Divine, Cindy.
Oh, really? That's good.
Right? Could you imagine?
Debbie is divine.
But no, I think, biz dev for us has all been about relationships.
Yeah.
And as we grow toward a decade in business, that's something we're looking to improve on, is making sure that we are front of people's mind. And certainly, again, with gratitude for all that you do to promote our work, it's important that we get out to the system works, right? I owe you a letter for that, but the system works. People see our work and they call, and then happy with the product that we deliver. So I do think that biz dev is an important opportunity for us to tap into in the future.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, you know, it's just important because I just think you're such an amazing example of like, okay, you're not so young anymore, but like you did a lot of things right. And your experience helped too, right? Your experience in retail helped a lot, but also that kind of, I see that like energy that, and the way you have, like you said, that you said many times in this conversation, the relationship you have with the clients, it's a yes game. It's not a no game. It's a yes, you know, it's a yes game. And you were telling me like, you know, you were telling me about like opening up Real, like how quickly it all moved. You gotta like have your design chops ready and move. Yeah. And you've made those, you've made that happen. And that's why people are talking, you know, it's a service industry. It is. I mean, we want the best design. I know you do, and I know I do too, but you also have to be able to get the project done. And you're a great example of that. Thanks.
You said service design, and it made me laugh in my head because I often say to my team sometimes, I'm like, oh, we have some hair braiding to do, guys. Like we gotta talk to our clients and make sure that they know that we hear them. But I call it hair braiding. So
you do? Oh, that's much better. The hair braiding. I love that. I love that. Good. Yeah. So is there something to share with like how, like moving forward, you know, a lesson learned or, you know, I mean, you've been giving us a lot of lessons, but, you know, just like maybe one more thought.
Yeah, because I know we have like all different people who join these calls. And I think tell me like sometimes it's students, sometimes it's whatever. You started to hint at it, but I, when I was looking for a career a very long time ago now, it was actually my uncle who was a doctor, and I interned for him. At the end of the summer,
really?
Like, do you want to be a doctor? And I was like, I could be a doctor. My mom would love it if I were a doctor.
Yeah.
And he's like, do you want to be a doctor? And I said, and his advice was, Dan, do something you love well enough that you would do it for free. And then do it well enough that people pay you. And it was like this light bulb moment.
That's it. That's it.
Like, I went home and I'm like, Mom, I'm going to go to interior design school. And she was like, what the heck happened to that intern? I thought I was getting a doctor.
You were going to be a doctor.
Right? But I do think that it really speaks to the heart of what we all do as creatives. We love what we do. We pour our whole selves into it. Yeah. And I do think that you have to play to your strengths and you have to complement your own skill set with the things that you have deficits in. Like we identified tonight, I'm not the biz dev person, but I know how to make sure a client feels heard. Yeah. So, you know, I would say advice is learn what you're good at and then find people to support you in the things that you, and own that you can't be good at everything, right?
Yeah. Wait, you said, first of all, Architecture by Design keeps sending these beautiful comments. Thank you so much. It's lovely. You said it. I'll repeat kind of what you said, which is really be aware of what you're good at and be really aware of what you're not good at. Because that's just as important. Yeah. And, so you got to have that yin and yang going on, right? You don't have to, like you can decide that, if you can develop, being better at something, we all want to do that. But something you're really not good at and you really don't want to do, find somebody who can.
It's interesting. We've done a lot of interviews for new team members recently. So if you're out there and you're looking, give me a call. But that's my selfless plug.
I love that.
But we've been talking to people, and one of the questions I always ask in an interview is, what is your favorite part of a project to work on? Because I think people do their best work when they love the work they're doing.
For sure.
And some people answer, I love CAD. Some people are like, I love concepts. Some people, tell me what you like to do, and then I'll figure out how to get you that work, because I want the best product from you, and I think you're going to do the best if you love what you're doing.
I agree. And when I review portfolios from students, a lot of times when you're that young, you kind of are in the vibe of the class, whatever the class is, and you kind of see the star student as the thing you want to aspire to, which is really the wrong thing to do. And I know I've looked through portfolios where someone was like had an amazing hand. Yep. And, I'm like, that should be the first thing someone sees in your portfolio. Really? Yes, really, because you don't know what you don't know what Dan wants. When he's hiring somebody, he may want exactly the talent that you have, and your talent is your talent. So that's great advice.
To own that part that you can do well. And I think to your point, you don't have to be good at everything.
Right, exactly.
There is no, it takes a village to build these projects.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Dan Mazzarini, BHDM Design. Look them up on Instagram. You really made my evening. I love seeing you. I'm sending you lots of love and hugs.